So I guess going through school, especially back in the time period that I did, to be a carpenter was just not a thing that was, made available to women
Yeah.
or girls of any age or anything like that. And so I was sort of raised in a small country town, so that kind of even personified it a little bit more. And, because you've got some very old values, in those smaller country towns, more traditional.
Yeah.
And certainly, in a building game, it's a non-traditional kind of role for females to get into. So, when I was very young at school and stuff, I always wanted to be one of two things. One was, a carpenter, because I had influences around me from friends and relatives that were in the building game. And the other one was to be a police officer. Now, unfortunately, being female, I couldn't entertain the idea of being a carpenter or a joiner. And to be a police officer, I needed to be back then quite a bit taller than I am. So I missed out on both of them, quite frankly. And I ended up, by pure chance, joining the prison service. It was just, one of those sort of chance meetings where I met this guy who was head of probation and parole in New South Wales, who happened to be the uncle of my then partner. And he said to me, why don't you come join the prison service, So that's kind of where I started my working life or career life, was in the prison service. And so I did that for a number of years, and then my partner decided that they wanted to move to Queensland to be with family. And so subsequently I left the service in New South Wales and went to Queensland. And I think I was there for about maybe a couple of weeks. And I saw an advertisement, because I was job hunting, and I saw an advertisement for apprentices with Queensland Master Builders. And so I thought, what the hell? We're a few years down the track since I left school, give it a go. And luckily for me, I could have had, at that point in time, they were trying to get women into non-traditional trades, which I didn't know. It was just by pure chance that I rung up this ad, and they were like, they couldn't get me in the door quick enough. And I saw the ad on the Saturday, and by the Monday afternoon following, I had an apprenticeship with Queensland Master Builders as a carpenter and joiner. So, I was elated, of course, because that was something I'd wanted to do my entire life, but just never had the opportunity to. So I kind of started a bit later than most apprentices would start, these days, around the age of, anywhere from 16 to 20. And so I started a bit later than that. And yeah, that's kind of how I rolled into that kind of carpenter and joiner role. And I did an apprenticeship for, obviously I think they finished me up early. I managed to finish my apprenticeship earlier than the required 4 years, and then went on to supervise sites for Queensland Master Builders, building lots of social housing complexes and stuff like that. So that's kind of how it kind of rolled on, at that point in time, to get into a trade. And then subsequently, a few years after that, another sort of acquaintance of an acquaintance called up to say, hey, are you interested in coming back to the prison system? We'd like you to set up an industries portfolio for the prison system. So that's kind of went back into the prison system, but still maintained that kind of, carpenter and joiner stuff, because that became relevant. And, I went on to uni at that point as well. I'd done some university studies in construction management, and and then the rest is kind of history. But that's all got into that kind of prison, carpenter and joiner trade kind of stuff. Yeah.
You really brought your worlds together when you did that, which is fabulous.
Well, it did, yeah, for sure. So I left the prisons, went into the building trade, spent a lot of good years there with a lot of good stories, and, then went back to the prisons. And both of those times, interestingly enough, the prison system for women at the time I joined was about putting females into male prisons and males into females, because traditionally that had been females in females, males in males. So I was the second intake, I think, of women to go into the male prison system in New South Wales. And I think I was like the third woman or something that had actually gone into a high security men's prison. And obviously with Queensland and the apprenticeship, I was the first and only apprentice at that time. Yeah.